It was a little past 11:30 on a Thursday night when I clocked in for my shift at the old Crescent Pines Hotel, a five-story building that sat on the edge of town, half hidden behind rows of pines that looked black under the weak glow of the streetlights. I'd been working the night shift there for about 6 months, mostly covering for the usual night clerk who'd taken time off after his wife had a baby. It wasn't a bad gig. Quiet most nights, a few guests checking in late, some delivery drivers coming through, and the occasional drunk couple arguing in the hallway. The pay wasn't great, but it gave me time to study during the slow hours. The hotel itself had that old faded charm: polished wood counters, brass lamps, paintings of forests and lakes that had long lost their color, and a faint smell of cleaning chemicals mixed with something older, like damp wood. The manager, a woman named Linda, always said the building had character. I guess that's one way to describe creaking floors and flickering hallway lights that maintenance never seemed to fix. That night started just like any other. I grabbed a cup of burnt coffee from the lobby machine, nodded to the housekeeper finishing her shift, and sat behind the front desk scrolling through the reservation logs. The rain had started sometime before midnight. Light at first, but steady enough that I could hear it tapping softly against the tall glass windows by the lobby doors. It was comforting in a way, that steady rhythm against the quiet hum of the vending machine. Around 12:15, I noticed movement on the security monitor. Camera 4, East Hallway, 3rd floor, showed a figure stepping out of one of the rooms, number 312. It wasn't unusual for guests to wander around, but what caught my attention was that the person didn't seem to move normally. They walked slowly, almost hesitantly, stopping every few steps as if listening for something. The grainy black and white feed didn't help, but I could see their outline. Tall, wearing something loose, like a robe or long coat. I leaned closer, squinting at the small screen. The person turned their head slightly toward the camera, and though the image was fuzzy, I could swear their face was unnaturally pale, almost glowing against the dim corridor light. Then the feed flickered, just for a second, and when it came back, the hallway was empty. I waited, expecting them to reappear, maybe walking out of frame or back toward their room, but nothing. The hallway remained still. I checked the room log. 312 was supposed to be vacant. It hadn't been booked for 3 days. I hesitated, then picked up the radio and called up to maintenance, asking if anyone was working on that floor. No answer. The guy on duty, Martin, usually kept his radio on, but sometimes he'd take smoke breaks in the back parking lot where the signal was bad. I told myself it was probably just an old recording glitch. The system sometimes replayed old footage when the power surged. Still, something about the way that figure moved lingered in my mind. Around 1 a.m., a guest came down, middle-aged man in a wrinkled suit, complaining that the TV in his room kept turning on by itself. "It's like someone keeps changing the channels," he said, rubbing his eyes. "I turned it off 3 times, and every time I wake up, it's playing static." I apologized, offered to check it out, and followed him back upstairs. His room was 309, just down the hall from 312. When we got there, sure enough, the TV was on, screen glowing white noise across the dark room. The man muttered something under his breath, frustrated as I walked over and unplugged it. The moment I did, the screen went dark, but the sound, that faint static hiss, continued for a few seconds longer, even though the cord hung loose. The guest looked at me, wide-eyed. "You heard that, right?" he asked. I nodded slowly, pretending to stay calm. I told him it was probably residual audio from the speaker, a harmless electrical delay, but I knew that wasn't how speakers worked. Back at the front desk, I checked the maintenance reports. The power system on the 3rd floor had some rewiring issues last month, but nothing that should cause that kind of interference. Around 2:30, the rain stopped. The hotel went completely silent. That strange, heavy silence that only happens in the early morning hours, when even the vending machine hum seems distant. I decided to check the 3rd floor myself, just to put my mind at ease. I grabbed the master key card and flashlight and took the elevator up. The doors opened with a faint chime, and the moment I stepped out, I felt it. The air was colder, heavier, like walking into a room that hadn't been opened in years. The hallway lights flickered faintly, and I could hear a faint dripping sound somewhere near the far end. As I passed room 309, I slowed down, glancing at the door. Inside, the guest was probably asleep again. I kept walking until I reached 312. The door was closed, no sign of movement inside. I tried the handle. Locked. I slid the master key in, and the green light blinked. I pushed the door open slowly. The smell hit me first. Something stale and metallic, mixed with the faint scent of damp carpet. I swept my flashlight across the room. Everything looked normal at first. Bed neatly made, curtains drawn, TV unplugged. But then my light caught the bathroom door. It was half open, and water was dripping from the edge, forming a small puddle that trailed toward the carpet. I froze, listening. Drip, drip, drip. I stepped closer and nudged the door open with the edge of my flashlight. The bathroom was empty, but the faucet was on, cold water running steadily into a sink filled almost to the brim. I turned it off, my hand trembling slightly, and looked up at the mirror. For just a split second, I thought I saw someone standing behind me. A faint reflection of a tall figure at the edge of the frame. I spun around, heart pounding, but the room was empty. I took a step back, staring at the mirror again. Nothing there now but my own pale, tired face staring back. I told myself I was just exhausted, that the shadows and dim light were playing tricks on me. I locked the room again and headed back down. But even as I sat at the front desk trying to focus on paperwork, I couldn't shake that feeling of being watched. Around 3:45, the elevator bell dinged, someone coming down from the upper floors. I looked up at the monitor and saw the same figure again, standing in the elevator, head bowed, long dark robe hanging loosely. The doors opened into the lobby, but no one stepped out. I waited a few seconds, then walked around the counter to check. The elevator stood open, empty. The floor was wet, as if someone had tracked water in from outside. The doors slowly closed, sealing the silence again. I stared at my reflection in the polished steel surface, my own nervous eyes looking back. I didn't sleep the next day. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that figure in the monitor, motionless, watching. When I came back for my next shift, Linda met me in the lobby looking pale. She told me Martin, the maintenance guy, had quit suddenly that morning. Said he didn't feel safe in the building anymore. He wouldn't explain why, just dropped his keys and left. I didn't ask. Part of me didn't want to know. But that night, as the clock ticked past midnight and the rain began to fall again, I realized that the room log still showed something strange. Room 312, marked as occupied. The moment I saw that the system listed room 312 as occupied, a cold shiver crawled up my neck because I'd personally locked that room less than 24 hours earlier and no new reservations had been made since. Yet the computer clearly displayed a check-in time of 11:57 p.m. under a blank guest name field, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for something to fill itself in, and for a second I actually thought the system was glitching again until the lobby printer started whirring on its own, spitting out a single folded page that simply read, "Guest confirmed, 312. I stared at the paper, trying to laugh it off, but the words were printed in a faint gray typeface the hotel system didn't even use, as if the ink had been drawn from some older machine buried in the walls. I turned the sheet over, blank on the back, and then noticed the faint outline of a fingerprint smudged into the corner, a wet mark that hadn't been there before, and it was cold when I touched it. At that exact moment, the front door sensor chimed, the automatic bell that rang whenever someone entered the lobby, and a blast of night air came through even though the glass doors stayed tightly shut. The air smelled like rain and something metallic, almost like the bathroom in 312 the night before. The monitors flickered. Camera 3 on the ground floor showed movement again. That same tall figure, this time standing near the vending machines. I turned toward that corner of the lobby, but of course, no one was there. The vending lights blinked, one can of soda shaking slightly as if it had just been nudged. The hum of the compressor deepened, droning low like a whisper, and I decided I'd had enough of strange noises and electronic ghosts for one lifetime. So I picked up the radio and called Linda, hoping she might still be awake. She answered groggily, told me not to mess with that floor and that she'd explain in the morning, which only made my nerves worse. Her voice had that shaky edge people get when they're pretending not to be afraid. She said, If you hear anything from 312, just stay downstairs, all right? We've had incidents. Then she hung up before I could ask what kind of incidents. I sat there, the lobby clock ticking far too loudly, thinking about quitting just like Martin had, but curiosity gnawed at me until it drowned out the fear. Around 2 a.m., I grabbed the flashlight again and took the service stairs, avoiding the elevator this time. The stairwell smelled like dust and cleaning supplies, and every step echoed up the concrete shaft. By the time I reached the third floor, I could hear faint music, something old-fashioned, tinny like from a phonograph. It was coming from down the hall, from 312. My heart was hammering so hard it drowned the sound for a second, but as I crept closer, I recognized the melody. Blue Moon. My grandmother used to hum that tune. It made the hair on my arm stand up. When I reached the door, I noticed the card reader light was glowing green already. Unlocked. I pushed the door open and the music cut off mid-note. The room was dark except for the faint silver glow of moonlight seeping through a gap in the curtains. On the table beside the TV lay the printed page from the lobby printer, flattened perfectly, and beneath it, a room key card that had my name written on a piece of masking tape. I swear I'd never seen it before. The sink in the bathroom was dripping again, slow, deliberate drops like a metronome. I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. Then the bathroom light snapped on by itself, harsh and white, and in the mirror's reflection, I saw writing appear across the foggy glass, though the room wasn't even humid. 4 words, crooked and shaky. "Do not leave me." My stomach dropped. I stumbled backward, knocking into the table, and the TV flickered on even though it was unplugged. Static filled the room, but inside the noise I thought I could hear someone breathing, slow and ragged, like the sound was coming from deep inside the speakers. That's when I noticed the carpet by the bathroom door was wet again, spreading outward like someone had stepped out of a shower and stood there dripping for hours. I turned to run, but the hallway outside had gone completely dark except for the emergency light at the far end. Every instinct told me to get back to the lobby, yet something compelled me to glance one last time into the room. Standing just inside the bathroom doorway was the same figure from the security footage. Tall, face too pale, eyes shadowed. He didn't move. He just stood there, head tilted slightly, like he was studying me. Then slowly he raised his hand and pointed toward the bed. I backed away, shaking, until my shoulder hit the door frame, and that's when I saw it. The indentation on the mattress, perfectly shaped as if someone invisible had just been lying there. The sheets rippled gently, as though disturbed by breath. I bolted, ran the whole way down the stairs, skipping steps until my knees nearly gave out. When I burst into the lobby, all the clocks were flashing 3:12 a.m. Every single one. The wall clock, the computer, even my phone. I didn't even bother checking out. I sat outside under the overhang until dawn, watching the windows of 312 from below. Sometimes the curtains shifted slightly, like someone was pacing inside. When Linda came in at 7, she saw my face and didn't even ask what happened. She just handed me a manila folder and said, "You might as well know." Inside were old incident reports, complaints from past guests about room 312 dating back to 1989. People had heard crying, static, and once a housekeeper claimed she'd found the bathtub half filled with water that smelled like iron, even though the room was sealed for renovation. The last report was from 1997. A bellhop named Aaron Lee went missing during a night shift. The final note in his file read, "Last seen delivering extra towels to room 312. No trace ever found." I could barely process the words. Linda told me the management had tried to close the room permanently, but every time they changed the locks or rewired the floor, the system would automatically reactivate it as available. Corporate just chalked it up to a data bug. That night, even after going home, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying what I'd seen, that figure, that message, the way my name had been on the key card. When I finally drifted off sometime after sunrise, I dreamed I was standing behind the front desk again, watching the monitors. But this time every screen showed room 312 from a different angle. And in each feed I could see myself standing in the doorway, frozen, while something invisible moved behind me. I woke up gasping, sweat cold on my skin, and the sound of dripping water echoing in my ears, even though my apartment pipes were silent. I told myself I wouldn't go back, but curiosity and rent are cruel motivators. 2 nights later, I returned for my shift, telling myself I'd keep to the lobby no matter what. But around midnight, the system pinged with a maintenance request. Guess which room? 312. The note field said only, "Please send him up." No sender name, no timestamp. I sat there staring at the screen, every rational thought in my head telling me it had to be some leftover automation script. Yet part of me, the reckless part that wanted answers, reached for the master keycard again. This time, as I stood from the desk, the printer came alive once more, printing the same page. Guest confirmed, 312. Only now the ink was darker, and beneath it, scrawled in uneven handwriting, "You already checked in." I dropped the page, heart hammering so loud it filled my head, and looked toward the elevator just as it dinged open by itself. Inside, the panel light was glowing 3, as if someone upstairs had just pressed it. The doors waited, motionless, a silent invitation. And before I could stop myself, I stepped inside. The doors slid shut behind me, sealing out the lobby's weak light, and the elevator began to rise.